Hey guys, tonight we're stepping aboard the RMS Titanic, but not where you think. Forget the grand staircase. Forget the crystal chandeliers and the millionaires in tailcoats. Tonight, you're traveling second class. You're standing on a deck where the paint is fresh but practical, where the railings are iron instead of polished brass, where the carpet runners are clean wool instead of plush silk. You're surrounded by school teachers and clerks, small business owners and priests, families who saved for years to afford this crossing. This is the world of the respectable middle class, the backbone of Edwardian society, the people history forgot because they weren't rich enough to be fascinating or poor enough to be tragic. And here's what nobody tells you. Second class on Titanic was nicer than first class on most other ships. You're essentially traveling in luxury, even if you'll never see the swimming pool or the Turkish baths. Your cabin has running water, hot and cold. Your dining saloon serves four-course meals on White Star Line china. You have access to a library, a smoking room, a promenade deck where you can watch the endless Atlantic roll by. In 1912, most working people back home share outdoor toilets and bathe once a week in a tin tub. You're living like minor royalty, and you paid about $60 for the privilege. That's roughly $1,800 in today's money for a one-way ticket. Historians still argue whether second-class passengers fully understood the social engineering behind White Star Line's three-tier system, whether they knew they were part of a carefully calculated buffer zone between wealth and poverty, between privilege and desperation. You're close enough to luxury to feel aspirational, far enough from steerage to feel superior. And that psychological placement is worth its weight in gold to the company accountants. But tonight, you don't care about corporate strategy. You're just grateful to be here. You've left behind a world of coal smoke and cramped streets, of six-day work weeks and limited horizons. Ahead lies America, or for some, a return home after visiting the New World. Either way, this ship represents transformation. You're suspended between old life and new, between who you were and who you might become, floating on 46,000 tons of steel and ambition across an ocean that suddenly feels less like a barrier and more like a passage. The weird thing? You're safer here than almost anywhere else in 1912. Or so everyone believes. Titanic is unsinkable. The newspaper said so. She's got watertight compartments, powerful engines, a double-bottom hull. She's a triumph of modern engineering, a floating testament to human progress. You're probably safer on this ship than you would be crossing a busy London street or working in a factory or giving birth in a hospital. Death is everywhere in the Edwardian world. Typhoid, tuberculosis, industrial accidents, childbirth complications. This ship is a sanctuary by comparison, and it's beautiful here in its modest way. The dining saloon glows with electric lights, still a novelty for many passengers. The corridors smell of fresh paint and linseed oil, of starched linens and coal smoke, of the ocean itself somehow seeping through steel walls. You can hear the engines thrumming deep below, a constant mechanical heartbeat that becomes so familiar you stop noticing it. The ship sways gently, rhythmically like being rocked in some cosmic cradle. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop a comment below. Are you in Melbourne watching at dawn? London at midnight? Somewhere in the American Midwest, while the house sleeps around you? There's something wonderful about knowing we're all drifting through these stories together, scattered across time zones, but connected by curiosity and the need for quiet. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on a second-class promenade, April 10th, 1912. Southampton is disappearing behind you. The future is ahead, unknown and full of possibility. And you have 4 days to enjoy the crossing before everything changes forever. But you don't know that yet. Nobody does. For now, you're just another passenger, neither rich nor poor, neither famous nor forgotten, traveling in that comfortable middle space where most of human life actually happens. You're ordinary in the best possible way. You're safe, fed, warm, and moving forward. And tonight, for just a little while, that's enough. Your ticket and what it bought. Let's talk about money. You're holding a second-class ticket that cost roughly $60 in 1912 currency. That doesn't sound like much until you remember that a skilled laborer back home earned maybe $500 a year if he was lucky. You just spent more than 2 months' wages on a single journey across the Atlantic. For many passengers around you, this ticket represents a family decision, debated over kitchen tables, financed through loans, justified by dreams of American prosperity or urgent family business that couldn't wait for a cheaper crossing. Some of you mortgaged farms for this. Some sold businesses, cashed out inheritances, borrowed from relatives who expected repayment in American dollars within the year. The ticket in your pocket isn't just passage. It's proof that you belong to the respectable classes, that you're not traveling steerage with the masses, that you've arrived at a certain station in life, even if you'll never dine with the Astors. And what did your money buy? A cabin with 2 to 4 berths, depending on your booking. Running water, both hot and cold, an absolute marvel in 1912 when most homes had outdoor pumps. Electric lighting instead of gas lamps or candles. Clean linens changed regularly by stewards who remember your name. Access to a dining saloon where white-jacketed waiters serve you 4-course meals 3 times daily. Use of a library stocked with current books and periodicals. A smoking room for the gentlemen. A promenade deck where you can stroll and breathe ocean air without dodging cargo equipment. Here's the thing nobody mentions. This is luxury. Not compared to first class, obviously. Not compared to the millionaires upstairs with their private promenade suites and a la carte restaurant. But compared to how most people lived in 1912, you're traveling like royalty. Most working-class families back home share a single cold water tap with 3 other families. They bathe weekly in tin tubs filled with water heated on coal stoves. They sleep 4 to a room in tenement buildings where tuberculosis spreads like gossip. You're living a fantasy here, even if you don't realize it. The second-class dining saloon alone would humble most city restaurants. White tablecloths, china plates with a White Star Line logo, silver-plated cutlery, meals served in courses, soup, fish, meat, dessert. Choices even. You can request the roast lamb instead of the beef. You can have coffee or tea. There's fresh bread at every meal, butter in small dishes, condiments in proper containers. The stewards wear uniforms and call you sir or madam. Meanwhile, in steerage below, passengers eat simple stews in crowded mess halls and consider themselves fortunate. Historians still argue whether White Star Line deliberately priced second class to create a psychological buffer, whether the company understood that human beings need someone to look down on almost as much as someone to aspire toward. You're neither rich nor poor. You're the great middle, the respectables, the strivers. You work for wages but employ servants. You scrimp but never starve. You're one economic disaster away from steerage and one lucky inheritance away for first class. And the company knows it. They've designed everything to remind you of your place. Your cabins are toward the stern, practical placement, less desirable but perfectly adequate. Your promenade is shorter than first class, your library smaller, your smoking room less ornate. You can see the first-class areas but can't access them. Gates and locked doors keep you in your designated spaces, subtle reminders that you've paid for proximity to wealth, not participation in it. But right now, standing on deck with the wind in your face and England disappearing behind you, you don't care. You've escaped. For 4 days, you're free from the grocery bills and the rent collector, from the narrow expectations of your hometown, from the daily grind of earning and spending and surviving. You're floating on the largest moving object ever built by human hands. You're crossing an ocean your grandparents considered impassable. You're participating in the modern age, in progress itself. And at night, lying in your narrow bunk with the engines humming below and the Atlantic rolling endlessly outside your porthole, you feel something close to contentment. This ticket bought you more than passage. It bought you transformation, possibility, a story you'll tell for the rest of your life. Back home, you'll say, I sailed on the Titanic, and people will lean in closer, wanting details. You'll describe the meals, the electric lights, the feeling of the deck beneath your feet. You'll become someone who's seen the world, who's crossed the Atlantic on the finest ship ever built. You'll become someone who survived, though you don't know that yet. The ticket stub in your pocket, carefully saved, already precious, will become an artifact. Museums will want it someday. Historians will catalog it. Your grandchildren will handle it with reverence, trying to connect that small piece of printed cardboard with the enormous weight of history it represents. But tonight, it's just your ticket, your proof of passage, your key to 4 days of floating luxury and a future waiting on the other side of 3,000 miles of cold, dark ocean. Worth every penny, you think. Worth mortgaging the farm. And you're right, though not in any way you can imagine yet. The dining saloon experience. You're seated at a long communal table in the second-class dining saloon, and the first thing that strikes you is how civilized everything feels. White tablecloths stretch down the length of mahogany tables. China plates bear the White Star Line logo in gold trim. Silver-plated cutlery catches the electric light. Crystal water glasses stand at attention beside each place setting. Cloth napkins, freshly pressed, wait folded beside each plate. This isn't some rough mess hall or boarding house dining room. This is a proper restaurant, floating on the Atlantic. The saloon itself spans the width of the ship, painted in creamy white with oak paneling adding warmth to the walls. Large windows, not portholes, actual windows, let in natural light during the day. Electric chandeliers hang from the ceiling, modern marvels that still make some passengers nervous. The chairs are solid, upholstered in dark fabric, comfortable enough for lingering over coffee after the meal ends. You're sitting with strangers who will become familiar faces over the next few days. There's a schoolteacher from Leeds, traveling to a teaching position in Pennsylvania. A young married couple from Cornwall, the husband planning to open a shop in New York. An older widow visiting her daughter in Boston. A Baptist minister and his wife, relocating their ministry to Chicago. A businessman who's been quiet about his purposes, but clearly comfortable with knife and fork. These are your people now, your temporary community, bound by ticket class and table assignment. The steward approaches your table. He's young, maybe 20, wearing a crisp white jacket with brass buttons. He knows the menu by heart and recites it without hesitation. Tonight, your first evening aboard. You'll begin with consommé or cream soup, then a choice of fish, poached salmon, or baked haddock. For the main course, roast turkey, spring lamb, or beef with Yorkshire pudding. Vegetables served family style. Dessert will be plum pudding or vanilla ice cream, followed by cheese and biscuits if desired. Coffee or tea to finish. You're slightly overwhelmed by the choices. Back home, you eat what's affordable and available. Meat once or twice a week if you're lucky. Potatoes and bread forming the foundation of most meals. Vegetables when in season. Here, you're being offered multiple courses with actual options, served on fine china by uniformed staff who act as though serving you is their sole purpose in life. And here's what nobody tells you about second-class dining. The food is genuinely good. Not fancy in the first-class sense. No quail eggs or caviar, no elaborate French sauces or exotic preparations. But solid, well-prepared British and American fare, cooked by professional chefs, served hot and abundant. The portions are generous. The bread is fresh. The butter is real butter, not margarine. The coffee is strong and hot. The tea properly brewed. Historians still argue whether second-class passengers fully appreciated what they were experiencing, whether they understood that most people on Earth would never eat this well in their entire lives. You're consuming more protein in a single meal than many laborers eat in a week. You're drinking clean water without worrying about typhoid. You're eating food that hasn't been stretched with fillers or preserved with questionable chemicals. The conversation around your table starts tentatively but warms as the meal progresses. The schoolteacher talks about her new position, her hopes for American students. The Cornish couple shares their business plans, their dreams of prosperity. The widow shows photographs of her grandchildren. The minister offers a brief, unobtrusive blessing before eating. The businessman mentions Liverpool shipping concerns, carefully neutral topics that won't offend. You're all performing middle-class respectability. Nobody discusses money directly, though it hovers over every conversation. Nobody mentions class distinctions, though everyone's acutely aware of them. Nobody complains about the accommodations, though you've all noticed the locked gates separating second class from first. You're grateful to be here, grateful not to be in steerage, grateful for the illusion of prosperity, even if it's temporary. The stewards move efficiently between tables, removing plates, delivering courses, refilling water glasses. They're part of an invisible army of workers, cooks, scullery boys, dishwashers, servers, laboring below decks to maintain this floating world of comfort. You barely think about them, except to note when service is particularly good or particularly slow. 3 times daily, this ritual repeats. Breakfast at 8, porridge or eggs, bacon or sausage, toast and marmalade, coffee or tea. Lunch at 1, soup, cold meats or hot entrees, potatoes, vegetables, dessert. Dinner at 6, the full 4-course experience, the highlight of your day. Between meals, you can request tea and biscuits in the library or smoking room, but the dining saloon meals are the main events, the scheduled gatherings that structure shipboard life. And you start to notice the patterns, the hierarchies even within second class. Some passengers dress more formally for dinner. Men in their best suits, women in evening dresses that aren't quite fancy enough for first class, but still represent their finest clothes. Others remain in day dress, comfortable but respectable. Where you sit at the long tables matters too. The middle positions feel more prestigious than the ends, though nobody says this aloud. The food also carries subtle messages about your place in the world. You're eating better than steerage, but not as extravagantly as first class. Your turkey is roasted, not prepared by a personal chef in an a la carte restaurant. Your vegetables are served family style, not individually plated with artistic garnishes. Your desserts are simple and satisfying, not elaborate confections designed to impress. Everything reinforces the message. You're comfortable, but you're not wealthy. You're respectable, but you're not elite. Still, you hear whispers about first-class dining. Someone's cousin's friend traveled first class once and described meals lasting 3 hours, 10 courses, wine with every course, orchestras playing while millionaires debated which caviar to try. You try not to feel envious. You try to focus on your own good fortune. But human nature being what it is, you can't help wondering what you're missing just a few decks above. The steward brings dessert, plum pudding with custard sauce, and you realize you're full. Comfortably, satisfyingly full in a way that feels almost decadent. You've eaten more in this one meal than you typically eat in a day back home. Your stomach, and used to such abundance, protests slightly. But it's a pleasant discomfort, the physical sensation of plenty. Around you, other passengers are finishing their meals, lingering over coffee, chatting with new acquaintances. Some will adjourn to the smoking room for cigars and conversation. Others will take a turn on the promenade deck, working off the heavy meal with fresh air and ocean views. A few will return to their cabins for early rest, still adjusting to the ship's motion and the time change. You sit back in your chair, napkin on the table, and feel something like contentment. For more days of this. For more days of being served, of eating well, of pretending you've always lived this comfortably. And then reality waits in New York or wherever you're headed. Bills and work and the daily struggle to maintain respectability. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight, you're a second-class passenger on the finest ship afloat, and the dining saloon steward is asking if you'd care for more coffee. You would actually. You very much would. Your cabin, modest comfort afloat. You're standing in a space roughly 8 feet by 10 feet, and this is home for the next 4 days. 2 bunk beds stacked vertically against one wall. A small washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher. A mirror mounted above the washstand, slightly foxed around the edges, but functional. A wooden chair that's seen better days, but still sturdy enough. Hooks on the wall for hanging clothes. A single porthole, perhaps 12 inches in diameter, offering a circular view of endless ocean. The walls are painted white, though calling it white is generous. It's more of a cream color that hides dirt and scuff marks from countless previous passengers. The floor is covered in patterned linoleum, practical and easy to clean, though it shows we're in the high-traffic areas near the door. The ceiling is low enough that tall men instinctively duck when entering, even though there's technically enough clearance. This is luxury in 1912, though your modern sensibilities might struggle with that designation. The bunk beds have actual mattresses, thin, but real mattresses with springs, not straw-filled sacks. Clean white sheets, changed regularly by the stewards. Wool blankets with a White Star Line logo woven into the fabric. Pillows that are slightly lumpy but adequate. In an era when many working families sleep on rope beds or share mattresses on the floor, this represents genuine comfort. The washstand is the cabin's crowning glory. Both hot and cold running water delivered through brass taps that gleam from constant polishing. You can wash your face with warm water in the morning without heating kettles on a stove. You can fill the basin for a quick sponge bath without hauling buckets from a communal pump. The soap provided is plain but clean-smelling, replaced when it gets too small to use effectively. There's even a chamber pot discreetly stored under the lower bunk. Those shared toilet facilities are located down the corridor. Real flush toilets, another modern marvel that many passengers are experiencing for the first time. No more trudging to outdoor privies in the cold and dark. No more emptying chamber pots every morning. Just pull the chain and watch your waste disappear into the ocean below. You're sharing this space with strangers, most likely. If you're traveling alone, you might have 1, 2, or even 3 cabin mates assigned by the ship's purser based on gender and approximate age. If you're a family, you might all squeeze into one cabin. Children in the upper bunks, parents below, privacy achieved only through closed eyes and gentlemen's agreements. Single women are housed separately from single men, propriety maintained even in cramped quarters. Historians still argue whether the close quarters of second-class cabins fostered genuine friendships or merely forced tolerance, whether passengers bonded over shared circumstances or simply endured each other until reaching port. The truth probably varies by cabin, by personality, by luck of the draw and cabin-mate assignments. Your trunk sits at the foot of your bunk, containing everything you own that matters. Clothes for the journey and for your new life ahead. Perhaps some books, though the second-class library means you didn't need to pack many. Personal items, photographs, letters, small mementos of home. Practical necessities like sewing kits, writing materials, toiletries. Some passengers pack tools of their trade, planning to work immediately upon arrival. Others bring family heirlooms, things too precious to leave behind or ship separately. The cabin feels smaller at night. When all occupants are present, preparing for bed, the space becomes a careful choreography of avoiding elbows and knees. You take turns at the washstand. You navigate around each other while changing into night clothes, eyes averted, modesty maintained through mutual pretense of not noticing. You climb into your assigned bunk, trying not to disturb cabin mates who might already be sleeping. And then the ship becomes your lullaby. The engines throb steadily below, a mechanical heartbeat that never stops. The ocean slaps against the hull, rhythmic and eternal. The ship creaks and groans, metal adjusting to stress and motion, sounds that seem alarming at first but become familiar background noise. Footsteps pass in the corridor outside. Muffled conversations drift through thin walls. Somewhere, a baby cries briefly before being soothed. The porthole shows nothing but darkness and occasional spray. You're floating on an ocean so deep that if Titanic stood on end, she wouldn't touch bottom. Beneath you, miles of cold black water filled with creatures humans have never seen. Around you, empty oceans stretching to every horizon. Above you, stars wheeling through clear April skies, constellations your ancestors used for navigation before steam engines and wireless telegraphs made the stars less essential. But inside your cabin, you're safe. The electric light, a single bulb with a pull chain, can banish the darkness instantly. The walls, however thin, separate you from the Atlantic's cold infinity. The blankets keep you warm despite the ocean air seeping through gaps around the porthole. You're cocooned in steel and human engineering, suspended between continents, between your old life and whatever comes next. Some passengers personalize their cabins during the voyage. A mother hangs a child's drawing on the wall with borrowed pins. A businessman arranges his toiletries on the washstand with precision, creating order in the small space. A young woman places a framed photograph of her family on the narrow shelf near her bunk, something to look at before sleeping. These tiny gestures of ownership, of making the impersonal space feel slightly more like home. The steward assigned to your corridor knows your cabin number and checks on you daily. He empties the chamber pot, if needed, brings fresh towels, ensures the water taps are working properly, reports any maintenance issues to the ship's carpenters or plumbers. He's seen hundreds of passengers come and go, knows which ones will be demanding and which ones will barely interact with him. He performs his duties with practiced efficiency, part of the invisible machinery that keeps second class functioning smoothly. During the day, you avoid the cabin when possible. It's too cramped for lingering, too dark despite the electric bulb, too intimate when shared with strangers. You spend time in the library, the smoking room, the dining saloon, the promenade deck, anywhere that offers more space and social possibility. The cabin is for sleeping, for quick changes of clothing, for storing your possessions. It's functional rather than comfortable, adequate rather than inviting. But at night, climbing into your bunk after a full day of shipboard activities, the cabin feels almost welcoming. Your muscles relax into the familiar contours of your thin mattress. Your head finds the comfortable spot on your lumpy pillow. The sounds of the ship create a cocoon of white noise that drowns out anxious thoughts about the future or regrets about the past. You're suspended in time and space, neither here nor there, free from responsibilities and expectations for just a few more days. You fall asleep to the rhythm of engines and ocean, surrounded by strangers who are becoming familiar faces, enclosed in a steel box that's somehow keeping you alive in the middle of the Atlantic. And you sleep deeply, dreamlessly, trusting that the ship knows what she's doing, trusting that morning will come with its routines and rituals, its meals and social interactions, its slow progress toward the distant shore. You're safe here in your modest cabin, with its white walls and narrow bunks and precious running water. You're grateful for this small space, this temporary home. And you have no idea how precious these ordinary nights will become in memory. These nights when safety felt permanent, when tomorrow seemed guaranteed, when the future waited patiently on the other side of a routine ocean crossing. But sleep comes easily tonight. The ship rocks you gently, and the ocean holds you suspended in its vast indifference, neither hostile nor welcoming, simply there, enormous, eternal, and incomprehensibly deep beneath your narrow bunk and thin steel hull. Social spaces and quiet entertainments. You're sitting in the second-class library, and it's quieter than you expected. Not silent. There's the ever-present hum of engines below, the occasional creak of the ship's frame adjusting to ocean swells, muffled footsteps in the corridor outside. But compared to the dining saloon or the promenade deck, this room feels like a sanctuary. A place designed for reading, thinking, existing peacefully without the pressure of constant social interaction. The library isn't large, maybe 20 feet square, but it's furnished with care. Oak paneling lines the walls, lending warmth and a sense of permanence. Bookshelves built into the paneling hold perhaps 200 volumes. Popular novels, travel guides, religious texts, a few scientific works for the intellectually curious. Comfortable chairs upholstered in dark fabric sit, arranged around small tables. A writing desk stands against one wall, supplied with paper and ink for passengers wishing to write letters home. Electric lamps provide reading light, their shades directing illumination downward onto pages without glaring into eyes. It's a thoughtful detail, one of many small considerations that separate this voyage from rougher crossings on lesser ships. You selected a book, something light, maybe a detective story or a romance novel, and settled in one of the chairs. Around you, other passengers engage in their own quiet pursuits. An elderly woman works on embroidery, her needle flashing in the lamplight. A young man writes intently in what appears to be a diary or journal. A middle-aged couple share a newspaper, discussing articles in hushed tones that respect the library atmosphere. This is civilization, floating on the Atlantic. Back home, public libraries exist, but often charge membership fees or require references from respectable citizens vouching for your character. Here, the library is simply available, part of what your ticket purchased. You can browse freely, select books without judgment, spend hours reading without anyone questioning your right to be there. The selection leans toward popular rather than scholarly. White Star Line understands its audience. You won't find dense philosophical treatises or avant-garde literature, but you'll find the latest mystery novels, romantic adventures, improving works on history and geography, books about America for those emigrating. There are periodicals too, illustrated magazines, newspapers from various ports, journals covering topics from fashion to agriculture. Historians still argue whether second-class passengers fully utilized the library or whether it sat mostly empty, more symbolic than functional, a gesture toward culture that few passengers actually engaged with. The truth probably varies by voyage, by weather, by the particular mix of passengers aboard. Today, though, the library feels well-used and appreciated. The smoking room offers different entertainment entirely. You can hear it before entering. Deeper voices, occasional laughter, the clink of glasses and scrape of chairs. This is masculine territory, though not officially restricted to men. In practice, respectable women rarely enter unless accompanied by male relatives, and even then, they don't linger. Inside, the atmosphere is thick with tobacco smoke and conversation. Leather chairs and small tables create intimate groupings. A bar in the corner serves beer, whiskey, brandy, alcoholic beverages that cost extra but remain affordable by second-class standards. Playing card appear on tables, though gambling for serious stakes would be frowned upon. Men in shirt sleeves and loosened collars discuss business, politics, sports, the voyage itself. This is where information circulates, where rumors start and speculation flourishes. Someone claims to know someone who knows someone in first class, and stories about millionaire passengers drift down through the social strata like smoke. John Jacob Astor is aboard with his young, pregnant wife. Benjamin Guggenheim is traveling with his mistress. The ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, walks the decks checking every rivet and bolt. These stories may or may not be accurate. Verification is impossible, but they're entertaining, connecting you vicariously to wealth and fame. The smoking room also hosts practical conversations. Men exchange information about American cities, job prospects, business opportunities. Those who've made the crossing before offer advice to first-timers, which immigration officials to avoid, how to handle customs inspections, where to find affordable lodging in New York. Business cards are exchanged. Partnerships are proposed. The smoking room becomes an informal marketplace of information and connection. For women, the equivalent social space is less defined. There's no formal second-class women's lounge, so female passengers gather in the library, the dining saloon between meals, corners of corridors with comfortable benches. They form their own networks, share their own information, addresses of reputable boarding houses, names of employment agencies, advice about American customs and expectations. Female friendships form quickly in these circumstances, bonds created by shared experience and mutual support. Some passengers prefer solitude to socializing. You see them walking the promenade alone, standing at railings gazing at the ocean, sitting quietly in corners with books or newspapers. They're not unfriendly. They'll nod politely if you make eye contact. But they've chosen to spend this voyage in their own thoughts rather than forming temporary friendships with strangers they'll likely never see again after reaching port. And there are the children, of course. Second class carries numerous families, and children need entertainment that adults find exhausting. You watch them play simple games in supervised areas, running carefully around deck equipment, playing with balls or dolls brought from home, inventing imaginary worlds the way children always do. Their parents watch with expressions mixing indulgence and anxiety, aware that an active child on a moving ship presents dangers even with railings and supervision. The ship herself provides entertainment simply by existing. You can spend hours watching the ocean, its changing moods and colors, the way sunlight creates diamond patterns on wave crests, the occasional seabird appearing impossibly far from any land. You can observe the crew working, maintaining this floating city with practiced efficiency. You can study your fellow passengers, inventing stories about their lives and destinations, playing amateur sociologist with this cross-section of middle-class society. Evening brings musical entertainment occasionally. A piano in the dining saloon means impromptu concerts. Passengers with musical talent encouraged to perform. Hymns on Sunday evenings, popular songs other nights. Nothing elaborate like the first-class orchestra, but genuine and heartfelt. Voices joining together in familiar melodies, creating community through shared music, filling the dining saloon with sound that feels both ordinary and extraordinary when you remember you're floating on the North Atlantic. Some passengers organize informal lectures or discussions. The schoolteacher from Leeds offers a talk about American geography. The Baptist minister leads an evening Bible study. A businessman who's traveled extensively shares stories about foreign ports and exotic customs. These gatherings are voluntary and casual, entertainment created by passengers for passengers, making use of the collective knowledge and experience aboard. The promenade deck serves as both social space and escape. You can walk there alone, breathing ocean air and feeling wind on your face, enjoying solitude while surrounded by people. Or you can walk with companions, conversation made easier by movement and the slight distraction of changing views. Couples stroll together, parents walk with children, friends link arms against the wind. The promenade becomes a stage where shipboard society performs its daily rituals. And through it all, there's a peculiar timelessness to shipboard life. Days blur together without the usual landmarks of work schedules and household routines. You eat when the dining saloon opens. You sleep when darkness falls. Between meals and sleep, time stretches and contracts unpredictably. An hour in the library passes in what feels like minutes. 10 minutes standing at the rail, watching waves, can feel eternal. You're suspended between worlds, between your old life and whatever comes next. The social spaces and quiet entertainments aboard Titanic aren't spectacular or particularly memorable in themselves, but they create a rhythm, a temporary existence that feels both strange and comfortable. You're living in a community that will dissolve completely in a few days, forming friendships that may or may not survive beyond the crossing, participating in routines that exist only in this floating interlude. And for now, sitting in the library with your detective novel while an old woman embroiders nearby and a young man writes earnestly in his journal, this is enough. This quiet space, this borrowed book, this peaceful hour suspended on the Atlantic. You turn the page and continue reading, the ship carrying you steadily westward, the future waiting patiently on the other side of 3,000 miles of ocean. The Promenade and Fresh Air. You're walking Titanic's aft second-class promenade, and the first thing you notice is the wind. Not harsh or biting. April in the North Atlantic can be cruel, but today the air feels almost gentle. Cool enough to require a coat or shawl, warm enough that standing outside remains pleasant rather than punishing. The wind carries salt spray and coal smoke, an oddly industrial smell mixed with the ancient scent of ocean. Your hair whips loose from its pins if you're a woman. Your coat flaps if you're a man. The wind reminds you constantly that you're moving, that the ship is cutting through water at 22 knots, that you're traveling faster than most people will ever travel in their entire lives. The promenade itself is a narrow deck running along the stern, perhaps 60 feet long. Painted white railings separate you from the ocean below. The deck planking is real wood, scrubbed clean by crew members you never see, but whose work is everywhere evident. Ventilation equipment rises from the deck at intervals. Mushroom-shaped cowls that channel fresh air to the spaces below. Ropes are coiled neatly against bulkheads. Everything is orderly, maintained, designed for both function and modest aesthetics. This is your outdoor space, your allocated portion of fresh air and ocean views. First-class passengers have longer promenades, more elaborate deck chairs, areas shielded from wind and spray. You can see their deck from certain angles. Glimpses of wicker furniture and steamer rugs, of uniformed stewards serving afternoon tea, of leisure that looks effortless because someone else handles all the effort. But your promenade has something first class can never quite achieve: authenticity. You're closer to the ship's working reality here. You can see the wake churning white behind the stern, proof of the massive propellers driving you forward. You can watch seabirds following the ship, hoping for food scraps thrown overboard from the kitchens below. You can feel the ship's motion more directly, the way she rises and falls with ocean swells, the slight vibration of engines transmitted through deck planking into your feet. Other passengers share the space with you, creating a moving social tableau. An elderly couple walks slowly, arm in arm, bundled against the wind but determined to take their daily constitutional. Their doctor probably recommended regular exercise, and shipboard life provides perfect opportunities. Endless laps around the deck, measured distances that accumulate into miles of gentle walking. A young mother supervises her daughter, who runs carefully back and forth, burning childhood energy in the only safe outdoor space available to her. Two businessmen stand at the railing, smoking cigars and discussing American markets. Their conversation drifts past you in fragments: railroad stocks, import tariffs, opportunities in Chicago or Philadelphia. They're networking even here, building connections that might prove valuable after landing. The ship becomes an extended business meeting, relationships forming that will outlast the voyage itself. A solitary woman sits on a bench reading, her book held close to protect pages from wind. She's wrapped in a thick shawl, her face showing concentration as she fights to keep her place against buffeting gusts. Every few minutes, she looks up, gazes at the horizon, then returns to her reading. You wonder what she's reading, what story compels her enough to battle the elements for the privilege of outdoor reading. The ocean itself provides endless entertainment if you're patient enough to watch. Today, the Atlantic shows her calmer face, rolling swells rather than angry whitecaps, deep blue rather than storm gray. The horizon forms a perfect circle around the ship, the same in every direction, a geometric reminder of Earth's curve and your own insignificance. Sometimes you spot ships in the distance, passing steamers or sailing vessels, tiny marks on the vast emptiness that confirm you're not entirely alone out here. Historians still argue whether second-class passengers felt grateful for the promenade access or resentful of the invisible barriers keeping them from first-class spaces, whether they appreciated what they had or coveted what they couldn't have. Human nature suggests both reactions coexisted, sometimes in the same person, sometimes within minutes of each other. You lean against the railing and let your mind drift. Behind you, hundreds of miles east, lies everything familiar: your hometown, your family, your old life with its known quantities and accepted limitations. Ahead, perhaps 2,000 miles west, lies America, vast, incomprehensible America, with its promises and dangers, its opportunities and uncertainties. And here, suspended between past and future, you exist in a peculiar limbo where neither past nor future makes demands on you. For these 4 days, you're freed from ordinary obligations. No job to report to, no household to manage, no social expectations beyond basic courtesy to fellow passengers. You're in transition, literally and metaphorically, and transition has its own strange peace. You can't fix problems left behind in England. You can't yet address challenges waiting in America. All you can do is walk this deck, breathe this air, watch this ocean, and exist in the present moment. The ship's motion becomes meditative after a while. The steady rhythm of rise and fall, the constant forward momentum, the background hum of engines and slice of hull through water, it all creates a kind of trance state. You understand why sailors develop their own culture, their own relationship with the sea. Spend enough time on the ocean, and it changes how you think about land, about permanence, about human scales of time and distance. A steward appears carrying a tray of bouillon cups, hot beef broth offered to promenade walkers at 11 each morning. It's a small luxury, this warm, salty drink served in china cups, but it feels extravagant. You accept the cup gratefully, wrapping your hands around its warmth, sipping the rich broth while watching the endless ocean roll past. The bouillon tastes of comfort and care of a company that thinks about passenger well-being in small, specific ways. Other passengers gather for bouillon service, creating impromptu social clusters. Conversations start easily here. Weather observations, ship performance speculation, destination discussions. The promenade becomes a liminal social space where normal class barriers feel slightly more permeable. A shopkeeper can chat with a schoolteacher without awkwardness. A widow can exchange pleasantries with a young married couple. The shared experience of ocean crossing creates temporary equality, at least in these outdoor moments. Children play carefully supervised games near the stern railing, their laughter carrying on the wind. They're inventing elaborate fantasies, pirates and explorers, probably themes suggested by the voyage itself. Their parents watch with expressions mixing indulgence and anxiety, aware that an ocean liner provides limited safe spaces for active children. The promenade represents freedom within strict boundaries, childhood energy expressed cautiously. As afternoon progresses, the promenade population shifts. Morning walkers retire to indoor spaces. Afternoon readers emerge with books and newspapers. Couples appear for romantic strolls before dinner. Each group claims the space temporarily, overlapping at the edges, creating a constantly changing community that never quite solidifies into permanent social structures. And always, constantly, the gates remain. You can see them if you walk forward along the deck, barriers marking where second class ends and first class begins. Not hostile barriers, just practical divisions with polite signs indicating restricted access. The gates aren't locked, exactly, but crew members stationed nearby ensure passengers stay in their designated areas. Social control through architecture and presence, never through overt force. The gates fascinate you more than you'd admit. What lies beyond them? More elaborate promenades? Certainly. More comfortable furniture. Better views? Perhaps, though how much better can ocean views really be? The barriers represent something larger than physical space. They represent the social distances money creates, the invisible walls that separate human experiences even when those experiences occur mere feet apart. But right now, standing at your railing, watching your ocean from your promenade, you try not to think about what you're missing. You focus instead on what you have. Fresh air, ocean views, freedom to walk and think and breathe deeply. You're not in steerage, packed into airless spaces below the waterline. You're not trapped in some city tenement breathing coal smoke and disease. You're on the deck of the world's finest ocean liner, crossing the Atlantic in reasonable comfort, moving toward whatever future you've chosen or stumbled into. The sun begins its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in gradually deepening colors. Gold fades to orange, orange to pink, pink to purple. The ocean reflects these colors imperfectly, adding its own deep blue undertones. Other passengers pause to watch, drawn by the universal human response to beautiful sunsets. For a moment, everyone on the promenade shares the same experience. Rich and modest, young and old, travelers and emigrants, believers and skeptics, all watching the same sun sink toward the same horizon over the same ocean. The sunset doesn't care about your ticket class or your bank balance. The ocean doesn't distinguish between first-class and second-class souls. Out here, under this sky, beside this water, you're all just human beings on a floating steel island, temporarily equal in your insignificance against the vast indifference of nature. The moment passes. The sun sets. The air grows colder. Passengers drift toward interior spaces and the promise of dinner. You take one last look at the darkening ocean, breathing deeply of salt air and freedom, storing the memory of this deck and this voyage and this peculiar suspended moment between worlds. Then you turn and follow the others inside, where electric lights and warm dining rooms and human routines wait to embrace you once again. Children, families, and emigrant dreams. You're watching second-class children play a supervised game near the library entrance, and their laughter sounds like hope. There are perhaps a dozen children aboard in second class. Not as many as in Stewards, where entire families emigrate together, but enough to create a small community of young voices and boundless energy that refuses to be contained even by steel walls and ocean expanses. They range from toddlers clutching their mother's skirts to independent 10-year-olds who've already formed friendships and established hierarchies, as children always do. The games are simple because they must be. Tag, adapted for narrow corridors and the constant awareness of open deck spaces that could prove dangerous. Storytelling circles where older children entertain younger ones with tales of pirates and sea monsters, conveniently forgetting they're currently floating on an ocean that actually contains dangers their imaginations can't quite grasp. Jump rope in designated areas where crew members have deemed it safe. Card games taught by patient parents who understand that bored children on a 4-day voyage will find their own entertainment if not properly directed. A steward is assigned to second-class families keeps watch. Not quite a nanny, not quite a guard, somewhere in between. She's young, maybe 25, wearing a crisp uniform that marks her as crew, while her gentle manner marks her as someone who genuinely likes children. She organizes activities, settles disputes, wipes tears when homesickness or frustration overwhelms a child too young to articulate complex feelings about leaving everything familiar behind. These children are immigrants, though most don't fully understand what that means yet. They know they're going to America, that magical word that adults pronounce with reverence or anxiety, with hope or dread, but always with weight. America means something important, though the specifics remain fuzzy. Better jobs for Papa. A house with more rooms. Schools where teachers speak English and opportunities exist that England couldn't provide. Relatives who left years ago and now write letters describing prosperity that sound like fairy tales. The parents carry the real burden of emigration, and you can see it in their faces. A mother from Cornwall watches her 2 daughters play, and her expression cycles through emotions faster than she can control them. Pride that she can afford second-class passage instead of steerage. Anxiety about the unknown waiting in Boston or New York or Chicago. Guilt about leaving elderly parents behind, knowing she'll probably never see them again. Hope that this sacrifice, this enormous gamble, will give her children opportunities she never had. A father stands at the promenade railing with his son, pointing at the horizon and explaining about America. The boy is perhaps 8, old enough to understand they're going somewhere new, but young enough that he thinks it's an adventure rather than an ending. The father's voice carries forced cheerfulness. He's performing optimism for his son, while his own heart harbors doubts he can't afford to examine too closely. Historians still argue whether second-class immigrants experience their journey as liberation or trauma, whether leaving behind everything familiar felt like freedom or loss. The answer, as always with human experience, is probably both, sometimes simultaneously, sometimes alternating minute by minute. You notice the families tend to cluster together. Not formally organized, just natural gravitational pull toward others sharing similar circumstances. The families emigrating permanently form bonds with other emigrating families. They exchange information about American cities, share addresses of relatives already established there, promise to write letters, and maintain connections after landing. They're building networks of mutual support, recognizing that survival in a new country might depend on having people who remember where you came from. The children, blessedly, make friends more easily than adults. A girl from Leeds befriends a girl from Southampton, their different accents becoming a game rather than a barrier. They share a doll, invent elaborate stories, create the kind of intense, temporary friendship only children can form. Completely absorbed for 4 days, then forgotten within weeks of landing when new schools and neighborhoods demand their attention. 2 boys discover mutual interest in ships and engineering, spending hours examining ventilation equipment and trying to understand how the massive vessel works. They ask every crew member they encounter patient questions about engines and boilers and propellers, accumulating knowledge that may or may not prove useful in their American futures. Their parents encourage this curiosity. Technical knowledge means opportunity, means jobs, means the American dream their families are chasing across the Atlantic. The family's possessions tell stories if you know how to read them. Steamer trunks packed with wedding china, too precious to leave behind and too fragile to trust a cargo holds. Photograph albums containing faces of relatives they'll never see again. Tools of trades they hope to practice in the new world. A carpenter's favorite plane, a seamstress's best scissors, a clerk's ledgers from his last position. These objects represent continuity, tangible connections to identities that might dissolve in the enormousness of America. Some families are returning rather than emigrating for the first time. A woman with 3 children is heading back to New York after visiting dying parents in England. She's caught between worlds. Her children are American now, barely remember England, chafe at the constraints of English propriety. She feels English to her core, but has built a life in Brooklyn that claims her through daily routines and neighborhood connections. The return voyage feels both like going home and leaving home, an impossible emotional contradiction that she navigates through practical focus on children's needs. Mealtimes in the dining saloon showcase family dynamics under the stress of transition. Mothers coax picky eaters to try unfamiliar foods, aware that second-class meals represent luxury they won't likely afford again soon. Fathers enforce table manners with unusual strictness, wanting their children to demonstrate respectability, to prove they belong in second class despite uncertain futures ahead. Children negotiate for desserts, whine about bedtimes, exist in the blessed present-focused state of childhood that doesn't waste energy worrying about tomorrow. You overhear conversations that reveal the economics of immigration. A shop owner sold his business to afford passages for 6 family members. The sale brought less than hoped, and second-class tickets stretched the budget dangerously thin. They'll arrive in America with perhaps $50 between them and complete dependence on a brother-in-law's promises of employment. The gamble feels enormous when articulated aloud, but staying felt impossible. England offered no path forward for a man with ambition but limited capital. A widow traveling with her teenage son explains their circumstances to a sympathetic listener. Her husband died 2 years ago, leaving debts that consumed everything. Her brother in Philadelphia offered to take them in, provide the son with apprenticeship opportunities. She mortgaged her last asset, a small house inherited from her parents, to pay for passages and have a tiny cushion for arrival. If things don't work out in America, there's no safety net, no home to return to. This crossing represents complete commitment to an unknown future. The children sense their parents' anxieties even when words aren't spoken. They become quieter at certain moments, more clingy, more prone to tears over minor frustrations. They're experiencing enormous transition without the cognitive tools to process it fully. So they express it through behavior. A normally independent child refusing to leave mother's side, a usually cheerful child becoming withdrawn and sullen, a well-behaved child suddenly defiant over small requests. The ship itself becomes a transitional space for these families. Not quite England anymore. Not yet America, suspended between identities and futures. Some families embrace the liminal state, treating the voyage as holiday despite its serious purpose. Others endure it anxiously, counting hours until landing, unable to relax until feet touch solid American ground and the gamble's outcome begins revealing itself. Evenings bring a particular poignancy to family life aboard. Parents tuck children into narrow bunks in cramped cabins, reading stories or singing lullabies that might be the last remnants of English childhood these children will remember. Tomorrow in America, life will accelerate into adaptation and assimilation. Languages will shift, customs will change, identities will transform. But tonight, in this floating steel island, they're still who they've always been. English families carrying English ways toward an American future that will reshape them in ways they can't yet imagine. You watch a father lift his sleeping daughter from a library chair where she dozed off during the evening hymn singing. He carries her carefully through corridors toward their cabin, her head on his shoulder, complete trust in his protection. His face shows the weight he carries, the responsibility of making this enormous gamble pay off, of ensuring his children's lives in America justify everything sacrificed to get them there. And you realize these children represent the future in a way no adult can. They'll grow up American, forget their English accents, become part of the enormous immigrant wave that's building America into an industrial power. They'll tell their own children about crossing the Atlantic on Titanic, and those stories will become family mythology, origin narratives explaining how they came to be American. The parents are transplants. They'll always carry England inside them, always feel slightly foreign in their adopted country. But these children will be transformed, absorbed, remade. They'll be the generation that completes the crossing not just physically, but culturally, becoming genuinely American in ways their parents never quite can. For now, though, they're just children playing careful games in narrow corridors, laughing despite uncertainties, finding joy in the moment, because that's what children do. They live in the present while adults worry about the future. And their laughter sounds like hope, carrying through the ship's corridors like a promise that tomorrow might justify today's enormous leaps of faith. The stewards and service culture. You're watching your cabin steward work, and his efficiency borders on invisible. He's perhaps 19, wearing the white Star Line uniform that marks him as crew rather than passenger. White jacket with brass buttons, dark trousers, shoes polished to a military shine. His name is something like Thomas or William or James. But you're not entirely sure because he introduced himself once on the first day and you've forgotten, and now it feels too awkward to ask again. He remembers everything about you, though. Your cabin number, obviously, C, 78 or D, 52 or whatever designation the ship's geography assigned you. But also your preferences. You take tea rather than coffee at breakfast. You prefer your cabin tidied in the morning rather than evening. You have a nervous habit of leaving your pocket watch on a washstand, and he's taken to placing it carefully in the same spot each time, so you can find it without searching. These small attentions aren't accidental. They're the result of careful training and corporate philosophy that understands service as a competitive advantage. White Star Line competes with Cunard and other shipping companies not just on speed and luxury, but on the quality of passenger experience. And passenger experience depends heavily on crew members like your steward, who perform their duties with practiced invisibility. He appears when needed, disappears when not. You return to your cabin after breakfast to find your bunk made, fresh towels on the washstand, the chamber pot emptied and cleaned, everything tidied but nothing disturbed. Your personal items remain exactly where you left them. The book on your pillow, the letters on the small shelf, your clothes hanging on wall hooks. He's been in your space, touched your things, but left no evidence except cleanliness and order. It's a peculiar intimacy, having a stranger manage the private details of your daily life. He knows when you sleep and wake, what clothes you wear, what personal items you consider important enough to bring on this journey. He empties your chamber pot, changes your sheets, sees the wear patterns on your shoes, and the fraying on your second-best jacket. He knows more about your actual daily existence than most of your friends back home. And you know almost nothing about him. You don't know where he's from, though his accent suggests Northern England or Scotland. You don't know if he has family, what he does on shore leave, whether he likes this work or merely tolerates it as employment. You don't know his dreams or frustrations, his politics or religion. He exists in your life purely as function. The person who keeps your cabin habitable and responds when you press the call button. Historians still argue whether second-class passengers treated their stewards with more respect than first-class passengers did, whether middle-class travelers, being closer to service positions themselves, showed more consideration for those serving them. The evidence is mixed. Some passengers treat stewards with courtesy and small kindnesses. Others treat them as invisible machinery, part of the ship's equipment rather than fellow human beings. The steward hierarchy aboard Titanic is complex and strictly maintained. Your cabin steward reports to a section steward, who reports to a senior steward, who reports to the second-class steward, who reports to the chief steward. Each level of hierarchy carries responsibilities and tiny increments of authority. Your steward is near the bottom of this ladder, but even he has someone beneath him, the scullery boys and kitchen assistants who work in spaces passengers never see. He earns perhaps £3 monthly plus tips, which sounds like nothing until you remember that many laborers back home earn half that. The work is steady, the food adequate, the accommodations basic but dry and warm. For a young man from a poor family, steward positions represent upward mobility, not wealth, but security and respectability. The tips matter enormously, though nobody discusses this directly. At journey's end, passengers typically give their cabin stewards something extra, a few shillings, maybe £1 if they're generous or if the service was exceptional. These tips can double a steward's monthly earnings on a single voyage. So your steward attentiveness isn't purely about White Star Line training or personal pride. It's also about economic survival in a system where official wages barely cover basic needs. You watch him serve in the dining saloon too. He moves between tables with practiced efficiency, carrying plates and removing them, pouring water and refilling coffee cups, anticipating needs before passengers articulate them. He never appears hurried, though he's serving perhaps 20 passengers simultaneously. He never forgets who ordered what, never spills or fumbles, maintains the illusion that serving you is effortless and natural. The performance exhausts him, though you'd never know it from his expression. He works 16-hour days during crossings, with perhaps 4 hours of broken sleep in cramped crew quarters deep in the ship's interior. He stands when passengers want to sit, works when they rest, remains alert when they relax. His feet hurt constantly. His back aches from bending and lifting. He develops calluses on his hands from carrying hot plates and scrubbing surfaces. But his face shows none of this, just the pleasant, neutral expression of attentive service. Other crew members populate your second-class experience, each performing specialized roles. The dining saloon stewards who serve meals with professional courtesy. The deck stewards who offer bouillon and arrange deck chairs. The stewardess who supervises children and helps female passengers with clothing or personal needs. The night watchmen who patrol corridors ensuring safety and quiet. The engineers and firemen you never see, laboring in hellish conditions below to keep the engines running. Together, they're a small army of workers making your comfortable voyage possible. For every passenger aboard Titanic, there's roughly one crew member. Nearly 900 men and women working to transport, feed, entertain, and care for just over 2,000 passengers. The ratio seems excessive until you consider everything required to maintain a floating city. Cooking meals, washing linens, cleaning spaces, maintaining machinery, navigating safely, handling emergencies. Your steward is part of this massive coordinated effort, and his individual performance affects the entire system. If he falls behind on his cabin rounds, other stewards must cover for him. If he provides poor service, passengers complain to supervisors, creating ripples through the hierarchy. If he excels, he receives recognition that might lead to promotions or preferred assignments. He takes pride in his work, you think, though you're not certain. Maybe he's simply good at his job, performing assigned duties with the competence that keeps him employed. Or maybe he genuinely cares about passenger comfort, finds satisfaction in managing his small domain efficiently. You'll never know, because the service culture demands that he remain professionally distant, friendly but not familiar, helpful but not intrusive. As the voyage progresses, you develop a routine together. He learns your patterns, adjusts his schedule to match yours. You learn not to expect him during certain hours when he's serving meals or attending to other duties. You develop unspoken agreements. You'll try to keep the cabin reasonably tidy. He'll forgive small messes. You'll leave tips for daily service. He'll provide small extras like an additional towel or a later wake-up call. It's a relationship built entirely on transaction, yet somehow it feels almost personal. On the final morning, you'll shake his hand and press coins into his palm, thanking him for his service. He'll express gratitude with practiced sincerity, wish you well in America, then move on to prepare the cabin for the next passenger's boarding for the return voyage to England. You'll forget his name within weeks. He'll forget you exist within days. But for these 4 days, you're bound together in the strange economy of service, where one person's comfort depends on another person's labor. Sunday, April 14th, an ordinary evening. You're sitting in the second-class dining saloon after dinner, and nothing feels unusual. It's Sunday evening, which means the meal was slightly more formal than usual. Roast beef instead of the weekday fare, extra care taken with desserts, a general sense that Sunday deserves special acknowledgement, even at sea. The stewards wore their best uniforms. Passengers dressed in their finest clothes. The women in their good dresses, the men in proper suits rather than comfortable traveling wear. The meal finished perhaps an hour ago, but many passengers linger over coffee and conversation. Sunday evenings aboard have developed their own rhythm over the past 3 days. After dinner comes hymn singing, informal but regular, led by the Baptist minister and whoever else feels moved to participate. You're not particularly religious, but the hymns feel comforting somehow, connecting this floating steel island to traditions that stretch back generations. The voices rise together, slightly off-key but sincere. Nearer, My God, to Thee fills the dining saloon, followed by Eternal Father Strong to Save, that hymn specifically written for those at sea, asking divine protection for sailors and travelers. The irony won't occur to you until much later, until the words replay in memory with weight they didn't carry in the moment. Right now, it's just Sunday evening aboard Titanic, and the hymns are simply what happens on Sunday evenings. The temperature has dropped noticeably today. You felt it during your afternoon promenade walk, a sharp cold that required extra layers and made lingering outdoors less pleasant than previous days. Some passengers mentioned seeing ice during the day, though you didn't notice any yourself. Ice isn't unusual in the North Atlantic in April, and everyone knows Titanic's route takes her through waters where icebergs sometimes appear. But the ship feels completely secure, so the cold remains merely uncomfortable rather than concerning. After him singing, passengers scatter to their preferred evening activities. Some return to cabins for early rest. Others gather in the smoking room for cards and conversation. A few brave souls venture onto the promenade despite the cold, wanting fresh air before bed. You settle into a library chair with a book, content to read for an hour before retiring. The library is quieter than usual. Many passengers have already called it a night. Tomorrow brings the exciting prospect of arrival. You'll wake up approaching New York Harbor, seeing the American coastline, preparing for the controlled chaos of landing and customs and the beginning of whatever comes next. Tonight is the last full evening of suspended time, the final night of existing in this peculiar floating interlude between worlds. Around 10 o'clock, you feel a slight shudder. Not dramatic, just a brief vibration through the ship's frame, like she scraped against something or adjusted her engines suddenly. A few passengers look up, expressions mildly curious but not concerned. Someone jokes about hitting a whale. Someone else suggests the engine shifted. The ship continues moving forward smoothly, so whatever happened clearly wasn't serious. You return to your book. The library clock shows 10:30 when you finally decide to call it a night. Your cabin waits with its narrow bunk and familiar routines. Tomorrow morning brings New York and transformation, but tonight still belongs to shipboard life, to electric lights and engine hums and the secure feeling of steel walls between you and the Atlantic. Walking toward your cabin, you pass other passengers in corridors. Everyone seems normal, relaxed, ready for bed. A mother carries a sleeping child. Two businessmen continue an animated discussion from the smoking room. An elderly woman walks slowly with a cane, her cabin steward offering a steadying arm. Nothing suggests anything is wrong. Your cabin looks exactly as expected, bunk made with fresh linens, washstand prepared for evening ablutions, your night clothes laid out by the steward during dinner service. The porthole shows complete darkness outside, not even stars visible through whatever weather conditions prevail tonight. You're preparing for bed when someone knocks on your door. It's your cabin steward, still in uniform despite the late hour. His expression is carefully neutral, professionally calm, but something in his eyes suggests this isn't a routine visit. He asks politely if you'd mind putting on your life belt and coming up to the boat deck. Just a precaution, nothing to worry about. The captain has requested all passengers assemble topside. Purely routine. You're confused but compliant. Life belts hang in your cabin, bulky cork vests that seemed like unnecessary equipment when you first saw them. Now you're pulling one over your night clothes, struggling with unfamiliar straps, feeling slightly ridiculous. Other passengers emerge from their cabins in similar states of dress, some fully clothed, others in nightgowns and robes, everyone wearing the awkward cork vests. The mood in the corridors is uncertain but not panicked. People ask questions. What's happening? Did something break? Are we actually in danger? The crew members urge everyone upward calmly, maintaining that everything is fine. This is just a precaution. Please proceed to the boat deck in an orderly fashion. You climb stairs toward upper decks, joining streams of other second-class passengers moving upward. The electric lights remain on. The engines have stopped. You notice this suddenly, the absence of the constant thrumming that's been your companion for 4 days. The silence feels wrong somehow, like the ship is holding her breath. On deck, the cold hits you immediately. It's brutal, well below freezing, the kind of cold that steals breath and numbs exposed skin within seconds. You're in night clothes and life belt, utterly unprepared for this temperature. Other passengers cluster together, sharing body warmth, waiting for instructions that seem slow in coming. The stars are extraordinary tonight, more stars than you've ever seen, impossibly bright against the absolute blackness of moonless sky. The ocean is perfectly calm, unnaturally smooth, like dark glass stretching to every horizon. It's beautiful and strange and increasingly unsettling. Crew members are uncovering lifeboats and preparing to load them. This still feels like overreaction, like elaborate precaution for some minor problem easily fixed. Surely they're not actually planning to put people in those small boats out on that freezing ocean, leaving the warm, secure ship? That would be madness. Better to stay aboard while engineers repair whatever needs repairing. But the crew members are insistent. Women and children first, they're saying. Please step into the boats calmly. Everything will be fine. You notice something that makes your stomach drop. The forward part of the ship, barely perceptible in the darkness, sits noticeably lower than it should. The angle is subtle, maybe 5 degrees, but it's definitely there. Titanic is tilting forward, settling by the bow, sitting wrong in the water. And suddenly that slight shudder from earlier takes on completely different meaning. The hymns you sang 2 hours ago, nearer my God to thee, eternal Father strong to save, echo in your memory with terrible new weight. This isn't a precaution. This is actually happening. The unsinkable ship is sinking, and your ordinary Sunday evening has become something else entirely. The night, everything changed. You're standing on the boat deck watching crew members load lifeboats, and reality refuses to settle into comprehension. Women and children first, the crew keeps repeating. Calmly, please. No need to rush. Everything will be fine. But their voices carry an edge now, an urgency that contradicts their reassuring words. The lifeboats are small, open wooden vessels that look impossibly fragile against the vast, dark ocean. The idea of climbing into one, of leaving the solid steel deck beneath your feet, feels insane. Many passengers refuse at first. Why leave the warm ship for a freezing lifeboat on that black water? Better to stay aboard, wait for rescue ships that must be coming. Titanic can't actually sink. Everyone knows this. She's unsinkable. The newspaper said so. The company guaranteed it. This must be temporary, a precaution while repairs happen, nothing more. But the deck's tilt is increasing, subtle but undeniable. You watch crew members struggle with the gates separating second class from first class areas. The gates that have been locked throughout the voyage, maintaining social boundaries, keeping passengers in their designated spaces. Now, those boundaries have become deadly barriers. Some gates open eventually. Others remain stubbornly closed, crew members fumbling with unfamiliar locks or simply unable to find the right keys in the chaos and darkness. Historians still argue whether those locked gates cost second-class lives, whether the delay in opening them, the confusion about routes to the boat deck, the social engineering that kept classes separated contributed directly to the disproportion of survivors. The statistics will eventually tell a damning story. 65% of first-class passengers survived, while only 42% of second class did. But right now, you're not thinking about statistics. You're thinking about the family you left behind in England, the relatives waiting in America, the future that seemed so certain just hours ago. You're thinking about how cold the air is, how wrong the ship sits in the water, how the stars are beautiful and terrible and indifferent to human suffering. The lifeboat loading becomes more insistent. Women and children are being urged, then pushed into the boats. Some go willingly now, fear overcoming reluctance. Others cling to husbands, fathers, sons, refusing to be separated. Families are torn apart by protocol and crisis. Women forced into boats while men must stay behind. Children screaming for fathers. Husbands promising they'll follow on the next boat, knowing there may be no next boat. If you're a woman, you're facing impossible choices. Do you leave your husband and climb into that lifeboat, trusting his promise that he'll find another boat, that you'll reunite in a few hours when this is over? Do you refuse to leave him, choosing to stay together regardless of consequences? Do you think about your children in England or America, wondering if they'll become orphans tonight? If you're a man, you're watching women and children board boats while you stand helpless on deck. The lifeboats don't fill at first. People still can't believe they're really needed. Crew members struggle to convince passengers to board. Some boats launch half empty because loading takes too long and the ship's condition is deteriorating. You watch boat after boat disappear into darkness, rowing away from Titanic, carrying perhaps 30 people when they could hold 65. The music continues for a while. The ship's band, visible on the first-class deck, keeps playing, not frantically, not desperately, just steadily. Ragtime tunes at first, trying to maintain normalcy and calm. Later, hymns and waltzes. The music carries across the deck, surreal and heartbreaking. Men with instruments performing their duties while the ship settles deeper into the Atlantic. The cold intensifies as hours pass. You've been on deck in night clothes and inadequate layers for what feels like forever. Your feet are numb. Your hands can barely grip the railing. Other passengers huddle together, sharing body warmth, trying to shield children from the worst of the freezing air. Some people go back inside periodically, desperate for warmth, even if it means potentially being trapped below when the end comes. The ship's tilt becomes impossible to ignore. You have to lean backward now to stay vertical. Objects begin sliding across decks. Walking becomes difficult. The bow is clearly underwater, the stern rising gradually as Titanic settles forward. The lights still burn, electric lights that seem miraculous now, illuminating a disaster in terrible detail. Around 1:30 in the morning, the lifeboats are mostly gone. If you're still on deck, your options have narrowed to terrible choices. Some collapsible boats remain, canvas-sided vessels that crew members are struggling to launch from the roof of the officers' quarters. The angle of the deck makes everything harder now. Panic is spreading despite efforts to maintain order. You might make it to one of the last boats, or you might not. You might be part of the group that finds a collapsible boat, one of the last two that will launch, or the two that will float off the deck as the ship goes down, offering precarious refuge for those lucky or desperate or strong enough to cling to them. Or you might be among those who stay on the deck until the end, praying or weeping or standing stoically as the impossible becomes inevitable. The ship's angle increases dramatically around 2 o'clock. The stern rises higher and higher, people sliding down decks, gripping railings desperately, watching in horror as furniture and equipment crashes forward. The music stops. The band can't play anymore. Instruments useless as the deck tilts beyond 45 degrees. The lights flicker, burn brightly one last time, then go dark. Total darkness except for stars and the faint glow of distress rockets, fading trails. You hear screaming now, prayers, the horrible sounds of hundreds of people facing death together. The ship groans, metal tearing, bulkheads collapsing, the death sounds of the largest moving object ever built by human hands. If you made it into a lifeboat, you're rowing away frantically. Try to reach safe distance before the suction of a sinking ship can pull your small boat under. You're surrounded by other survivors, most of them women and children, some crying, some eerily silent, all watching the impossible sight of Titanic standing nearly vertical against the star-filled sky. The stern section rises completely out of the water, propellers visible, the ship standing on end like some terrible monument. Then she slides beneath the surface. The sound that follows, survivors will describe it for the rest of their lives, but never adequately. The sound of 1,500 people in freezing water, calling for help, crying out, their voices carrying across the calm ocean to the lifeboats floating several hundred yards away. The sound lasts perhaps 30 minutes. Then it fades, not because rescue comes, but because hypothermia silences voices one by one. The lifeboats drift in darkness on a perfectly calm sea, surrounded by debris and bodies and the impossible absence of the ship that was there just moments ago. Those who survived will wait hours for rescue, shivering in open boats, traumatized beyond articulation, changed forever by this night when the unsinkable ship sank and ordinary people faced extraordinary death. And you, if you survived, will spend the rest of your life carrying this night, remembering second class, the forgotten majority. You're drifting now through memory and silence, through the space where stories settle when the telling is done. Second class on Titanic carried 284 passengers that night. Of those, 119 survived. That means 165 people, teachers and shopkeepers, clergymen and clerks, families chasing American dreams, widows visiting relatives, children who laughed in corridors, died in the freezing Atlantic on April 15, 1912. Their names are recorded in official documents and memorial lists. But their stories, the texture of their lives, the details of their dreams, the small, everyday moments that made them human, those are mostly lost. History remembers the millionaires in first class. It remembers the tragic mass of steerage, the huddled immigrants whose deaths seem to confirm every fear about poverty and powerlessness. But second class occupies a strange middle space in memory, neither glamorous enough for fascination nor tragic enough for special attention. They were ordinary people, which is perhaps why they're forgotten. No Astors or Guggenheims in second class to attract historical attention. No romantic stories of Irish emigrants and doomed love to capture imagination. Just respectable middle-class travelers doing what middle-class people do, working hard, saving money, making careful plans, hoping for modest improvements in circumstances. Their ordinariness made them invisible in life and remains their epitaph in death. But ordinary lives matter just as much as extraordinary ones. The schoolteacher from Leeds who dreamed of educating American children, her death is no less tragic than any millionaire's. The Cornwall shopkeeper who sold his business to start over in New York, his drowned ambitions deserve remembering. The Baptist minister relocating his ministry, the widow visiting her daughter, the young married couple starting fresh. Each one carried an entire universe of memories and hopes and fears that ended in freezing water under indifferent stars. Historians still debate the fairness of survival rates across ticket classes. The numbers are uncomfortable. First-class passengers had a significantly better chance of survival than second class, who in turn fared better than third class. Was this deliberate discrimination? Structural inequality built into the ship's design? The result of locked gates and confused evacuation procedures? Or simply the cruel mathematics of proximity to lifeboats and knowledge of the ship's layout? The answer is probably all of these things, woven together in ways that can't be untangled now. What's certain is that being respectable middle class didn't guarantee safety, didn't protect against the Atlantic's cold, didn't matter at all when the ship went down and the water was freezing and there weren't enough lifeboats for everyone regardless of ticket price or social standing. The survivors carried guilt for the rest of their lives. Why did I survive when others drowned? What made me deserving of a lifeboat seat when 1,500 others perished? These questions haunted them through decades, unanswerable and inescapable. Some survivors spoke rarely about that night. Others became obsessed with telling their stories, testifying at inquiries, writing memoirs, as though constant repetition might somehow discharge the burden of inexplicable survival. And the children who survived, they grew up with this night as their origin story. Everything in their lives divided into before and after. Before Titanic, they were children with normal childhoods and ordinary expectations. After Titanic, they were survivors, marked by trauma, carrying knowledge that safety is illusion and the world is fundamentally unsafe. Some thrived despite this. Others spent decades processing the psychological damage of watching their fathers die, of hearing 1,500 people cry out in darkness, of learning at tender ages that adults can't always protect children from terrible things. The second-class dining saloon where you sang hymns that Sunday evening. It's gone, somewhere on the ocean floor 2.5 miles down, crushed by pressure or scattered by the ship's breakup, or simply dissolved by decades of salt water and bacteria. The cabins where you slept, the library where you read, the promenade where you walked, all gone, existing now only in photographs and memories and the fading recollections of survivors who were themselves long dead. But for a brief moment in 1912, those spaces were real and solid and full of life. People ate meals and made friends and worried about futures and laughed at small jokes and felt safe in their modest comfort. They were living ordinary lives in an ordinary way, not knowing they were living history, not suspecting their mundane voyage would become legendary tragedy. And that's worth remembering, not just the dramatic disaster, but the ordinary human life that preceded it. The meals and the promenades, the cabin routines and the library reading, the children playing and the stewards serving, all the small, unremarkable moments that constituted shipboard existence for second-class passengers who thought they were simply crossing the Atlantic in reasonable comfort. You're so tired now, tired from carrying this story, tired from the weight of all these vanished lives. Your breathing slows. Your thoughts drift and scatter like the debris field that surrounded Titanic's lifeboats in the hours before rescue came. You're floating in the space between remembering and forgetting, between history and sleep, between the solid world and dreams. Let yourself drift now, gently, peacefully, safely into rest. You're not in freezing water under terrible stars. You're warm and comfortable and alive in a time when Titanic is memory rather than present horror. The ship has been gone for over a century now. The passengers, second class and all classes, have been dead for generations. Their suffering has ended. Their stories have been told, as well as they can be told across the vast gulf of time that separates their experience from ours. And you can rest now, can let the stories settle, can release the weight of all this loss and tragedy and ordinary human life interrupted by disaster. The past is the past. The dead are at peace. And you are here, now, safe and warm, drifting towards sleep the way lifeboats drifted on that calm ocean, waiting for dawn and rescue that eventually came. Close your eyes now and let the darkness be gentle rather than terrible. Let sleep come soft and easy, carrying you away from tragedy toward rest. Tomorrow you'll wake and return to your own life, your own concerns, your own ordinary existence. But tonight, you've walked through history, experienced a vanished world, honored the memory of 165 second-class souls who deserved better than the Atlantic's cold indifference. Sleep now, deeply and peacefully, knowing their stories have been told one more time, knowing that remembering is itself a form of honoring, knowing that ordinary lives matter and should not be forgotten just because they weren't extraordinary. The ship is gone, but the memory remains, carried forward by each telling, each remembering, each moment of recognition that what happened to those people could have happened to anyone, could have happened to you, and the only difference between their fate and your safety is the arbitrary luck of when and where you happen to be born. Rest now in gratitude for your own safety, your own warm bed, your own ordinary life that continues while there's ended in freezing water more than a century ago. You're drifting, floating, sinking softly into sleep, and the ocean is kind now, the darkness gentle, the stars beautiful without terror because you're safe, so safe, and sleep is coming, soft as fog, deep as the Atlantic, peaceful as the eternal silence that finally came after the crying stopped and the rescue ship arrived and the impossible night ended at last. Sleep well, dear listener. Dream peacefully. And remember, when morning comes, that every ordinary life deserves to be lived fully, cherished deeply, and remembered kindly when it ends. Sweet dreams.